Good morning, everyone. The meeting will come to order. The clerk will note the roll. There is a quorum. We have the minutes of the March 13th meeting before us. Representative Carlson moves approval of the minutes. Any questions, additions, changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The minutes are approved by a wide margin. Representative Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, looking at the agenda, I see we have, after we're done with the bills, as you had posted late Friday, testimony on the budget resolution. And, the minority leader and I sent a letter to you, and we distributed it to other caucus members as well. And the concern was the short timeline to get a response to the budget resolution, being that the press conference was just held now an hour ago. Will there be any additional opportunity, because it's my understanding you're going to adopt the budget resolution Wednesday night. So I see on Wednesday night you have a rather lengthy period of time set aside. So will there be public testimony allowed Wednesday night in addition to whatever comes in today?
Representative Carlson, yes. And I guess I would say, Representative Carlson, 2 years ago when we did this, we had the testimony before we announced any budget resolution. And so I think in some ways it's maybe more transparent to do it this way in terms of having the resolution out before we take some. I think you can do it either way, but yeah, it's my intention to certainly take testimony now if we have people that are interested. We did not have many sign up. I think we've only got a couple, but if others here want to give testimony now, we're happy to take it. But we also did set aside time on Wednesday to take additional testimony.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, my concern is, as we indicated in the letter, the public notice part of it, to make sure that people would have an opportunity, being that it just came out, to respond to it. So I would view that as good news, and if you're going to take testimony on Wednesday night. Nobody's contacted me yet to ask about it. It was just my initial reaction to that timeline, and if it's out there and people know that they can testify in addition to this morning, Wednesday night, then that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? As Representative Carlson mentioned, we did, as I think everyone knows, announce the proposed budget targets this morning, and there's a copy of it in your packet today. So with that, members, before we get into taking testimony, we have 5 bills on the agenda. The first one is House File 140. Representative Erickson, could you come forward? Representative Erickson, welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. The chair will move that House File 140 be referred to the General Register. And Representative Erickson, I know we have really 2 amendments. Do you want us to talk about the amendments first and take those, or how do you want to do this?
Mr. Chair, just for the record, Representative Sandra Erickson, Chair of Education Innovation Policy here in the House, having the chair move House File 140, as well as the 828 amendment.
Okay, well, yeah, members, I'll move the 828 amendment. Representative Erickson, can you describe what the 828 amendment does?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. The 828 is more cleanup language. This is a work in progress. We have been working on this for months, and this would clarify that we are changing the membership by getting a little more specific on the teacher side, and also organizing it in statute so it's more readable. Also inserting another section, 120B.363 on page 12, where we list several sections that the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board money refers to. And finally, clarifying that Tier 4 requires a passing score on all required licensure exams under 122A.185.
Okay, any discussion of the 828 amendment? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the 828 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The 828 amendment is adopted. And members, I've got another amendment here, the 829 amendment. If you look at it, you'll see that it actually was created back on Friday, but I guess inadvertently we didn't get it out. What it does is it just strips out the appropriations section of the bill. And the reason we're doing that is while we have some fiscal data on the bill, we don't still have an actual fiscal note on the bill. However, it's my understanding that the costs are going to be carried in the education finance bill. And so I think given that, it's appropriate to take the appropriations section out and then hear the rest of the language on the bill. And then, as I mentioned, it's my understanding that the costs, whatever they might be, will be carried in the omnibus bill. So members, I would move the 829 amendment. Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I looked first to see if there was a fiscal note here, being that's how I roll, and I saw there wasn't one, but we're kind of relying on the fact that they're going to include the funding in the E12 finance bill. What happens if this passes and they didn't include the funding for whatever reason?
Representative Carlson, when the education finance bill gets here, there will have to be some changes to it.
Okay. I was just dealing with a what if, but.
Yeah, no, that's a legitimate question. That's a very legitimate question. And I guess frankly, I'm kind of frustrated again that here we have a bill that's been working its way through the process for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we still don't have a fiscal note on it. This is, I think, the third time this has happened this year that I would say we have a major bill before us. I think about the original health premium refund bill that we had in January, and I forget there was another one too that, again, we waited and waited for weeks to get a fiscal note on. I can't remember what the second one was, but anyway, it's been kind of a frustration. Here we are, it's March. This has been a topic that's been on the legislative agenda, not just, frankly, this legislature, but going back some years, and we still don't have a completed fiscal note. But anyway, we're trying to deal with it, and it's an important bill, and I guess I felt that since it's going to be carried in the Finance Committee, it made sense to deal with it this way. And I have Representative Liebling, then Carlson. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, is this going to the floor then without a fiscal note?
Representative Liebling is going to the floor without a fiscal note, and if we adopt the 829 amendment, without any appropriation language in it. Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in this case, who would have been responsible for the fiscal note? I know what MNB's role is, but then they turn it over to a state agency, and the state agency, in a sense, is disappearing. So
maybe I can.
how do we move forward when, if we pass this, there's no longer a state agency, and how do you get the fiscal note?
Well, I guess I would
They
say,
feed in,
Representative Carlson, first, they
there's no-
haven't disappeared yet, but maybe I can recognize Mr. Marks.
Mr. Chair, members, there were actually 6 agencies on the fiscal note. The Board of Teaching would have been the one responsible for looking at the Board of Teaching costs as well as the cost of the new board. And that's where we probably had most of the issues with the fiscal note. It also included the Department of Administration, the University of Minnesota, MnSCU or Minnesota State, the Department of Education, and Minute were all on the fiscal note. Several of those agencies are still not completed yet, and we've been working with the Executive Budget Officer at MMB. I think we've got some reasonable numbers at this point, but we don't have a completed fiscal note yet.
Yeah.
And the single piece of paper that was just handed out shows those numbers that Ms. Adrians and I have pulled from the fiscal note, working with MMB to try to lay them out on a piece of paper, on a single piece of paper.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman,
Representative
part of
Carlson.
it that I was referring to is the disappearance at some point of the Board of Teaching. And they would have been, or are responsible for providing some of the information to MMB ultimately. And it kind of depends on the timing of all this as to how quickly they disappear, I guess.
Well, Representative Carlson, I guess I would just say that they're still around now, and I think they should therefore contribute towards the fiscal note. And I mean, I guess, I don't think we want to establish a precedent that if an agency doesn't like what we're going to do to them and they then don't contribute to the fiscal note, that nothing's going to happen. I think that would be a poor precedent. But anyway, members, I guess we're working its way through the legislative process, and we'll see what does happen. But just due to, again, a somewhat unusual situation where we don't, again, yet have a fiscal note, I guess I felt this was a fair way to deal with it, especially since we'll have the education finance bill before us very soon.
Thank you.
So any other discussion on the 829 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the 829 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion prevails, the 829 amendment is adopted. Representative Erickson, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. House File 140 is the result of recommendations brought forth by a 6-member bipartisan legislative study group that met for 5 months last year to listen to stakeholders after an audit by the Office of Legislative Auditor pointed to a dysfunctional licensing system that includes the Board of Teaching and MDE's licensing division that had frustrated many, many candidates over the years. Our recommendations consisted of a move to one entity, in other words, to bring the Board of Teaching and the licensing division of MDE into one new creation, but allow the Board of School Administrators, which is known as BOSA, to remain separate as a board. Our recommendation also created a tiered system that would recognize the unique and valuable skill sets of career and technical education and acknowledge also industry-related professional credentials and work experience. Finally, we recommended clarification of teaching licensure statutes to ensure that they are easily understood, uphold accountability, transparency, and have lots of clarity, which is what we've been lacking. And at this time, I would like to give a shout out to Christina Pera, our new nonpartisan House researcher, who helped the team work through all of these revisions. I think what you see before you is a very readable piece of legislation that will ensure that we're going to have a seamless system coming up if this bill is enacted. So under the governance, the new board is called the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board. It is the creation of a new 11-member board. And so the Board of Teaching and the Division of Licensing and MDE now become a new board. I think you can read through the makeup of the board in your file if you choose. As you notice, we have added in the amendment another delineation for the rank and file teacher membership. The executive director of this new board would be appointed by the governor, so we have accountability. That is an area that we determined was lacking, and it was certainly pointed out in the OLA report, that the candidates who went through these frustrating days, weeks, months, and sometimes years to become licensed in Minnesota, especially if they were licensed in another state or received their education in another state, could not find anyone to go to whom they could hold accountable. As you heard discussed earlier, the transfer is and should be a seamless one, because Chapter 15 points out that when you move from one agency to another, this should work well, and so we're hoping for that. We have limited rulemaking to that which is authorized in statute. I want to point out to you that the Board of Teaching has done its utmost to spend money on promulgating rules for which they've not been given any direction over the years. In fact, in 2015, we gave them $100,000 to cover costs of rules that they never wrote. So the rulemaking now is by statutory authority only. Performance data is required as it has been in present statute for teacher and administrator preparation. The reviser's instruction, of course, is very obvious in the bill that we want all of those changes made appropriately throughout statute so that our new board name is present. Tier 1 and Tier 2 basically are ways to ensure that most who apply receive a license. Most who apply who are not licensed presently under the present system or even under a new system. And so in Tier 1, you will notice if you look at the bill that we provide a menu of options for the licenses in that we are trying to replace what is known as the community expert or the provisional license, not the provisional license, but the community expert. I'll just leave it at that phrase. We have had over the years, and this law was enacted in 1997 and made effect in 1998 when I was actually serving on the Board of Teaching under former Governor Arnie Carlson to have these community experts because we lacked teacher candidates in rural Minnesota even then. And so thousands of community experts have been present in our classrooms since 1998. So in this provision, we give the charter school or the district the authority to request a license for their community expert. They, of course, have to make sure that the background checks are done. And then in their choice for choosing this candidate, they have reviewed the candidate's qualifications of either a bachelor's or an associate's degree or a professional credential, which of course is most appropriate in the career and technical area, and that they will have completed coursework in the menu that you see printed for you on page 31 under coursework. There is no requirement to pass tests unless that, of course, is something they choose to do, which you will see in item 4 under section 10, line 31.18. Then in Tier 2, and these are graduated tiers, so they get to be a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more difficult to achieve. And by the way, presently, a community expert can be limitless applications from a district. We limit it to 1 year, 3 times renewal. And then if a district needs that community expert for a 4th time, we would ask this new board to promulgate rules to fulfill that requirement. So our goal is, to be moving in the direction of true licensure in the minds of what we consider licensure today. Tier 2 is much the same as Tier 1, except with a few more options. Well, I shouldn't say a few more options, with 2 of the options that we list under the menu on page 32. Again, this is limited to 3 one-time applications, and again, if a 4th application is needed, I shouldn't say application, request is made, then the board would also be expected to promulgate rules to fulfill that. Tier 3 then moves into the area where most teachers would begin, who have come from out of state, are brand new teachers, brand new candidates to a district. They would not have to have passed the skills test, however. We have listened to concerns from stakeholders and removed that as a requirement. They are welcome to take it, to pass it, but they would not be required to get licensed to have passed that. And then Tier 4 would be the highest level of the tier, where most of our present teachers would now be getting a license in the Tier 4. That would mean that they have at least 3 years of teaching experience, and they have the most recent summative teacher evaluation in their file that does not place them on an improvement plan. So, Mr. Chair, I think with that said, I've hit the highlights of House File 140. This is a major policy change, and it is, as I said at the outset, the work of about now 8 months that we have delved into this reform.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Erickson, I thank you and the committee for all the work you've done on the licensure provisions here. But as I've thought about it, some questions have come to my mind, and I received some email over the weekend, and just want to run through this with you, please. How many, do we know how many community experts are being used today in the state?
Representative Erickson.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair and committee. When I checked the minutes from the Board of Teaching for October, November, December, January, and most recently February, community experts were numbering in the hundreds, and experiential learning as well, but that receives a waiver. But we have been issuing community experts in the hundreds for years. This change to a Tier 1 would give them some status as a teacher because they're going to be teaching in our classrooms. So they would have that, I think, as an asset to their credential.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Erickson, along the lines that you just said. So I know the community experts had a limit as to how long they could teach. Is there any, will these Tier 1, will they then be on the steps and lanes pay scale and no limit? They can be tenured and...
Mr. Chair and committee, no, Tier 1 is not, Tier 1 licensure would not qualify for tenure.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Erickson, is there any limit to the number of years they could serve?
Mr. Chair and committee and Representative Erdahl, a district can request 3 years in a row an application, and in that fourth year, that fourth application would require that the Board of Teaching promulgate rules to allow these community experts to continue as Tier 1 licensed teachers. We have, presently, there's a limitless number of applications, and it's now an application process that the district makes. But we have limited it to 3 requests, and then on the 4th, the need for rules.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Erickson, then my final question. If I understand, the reasons for this and the shortages that we have and the difficulties, particularly in greater Minnesota, that we have, but I'm wondering if there were a situation where a Tier 3 or Tier 4 teacher was available to apply for a job, would they be given preference over a Tier 1?
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair, committee members, and Representative Erdahl, you tell me a district and a school board that's not going to follow that. You tell me who's not going to follow that, because I respect my school districts and my school boards and those who hire, and I believe that that's what they'll do, and that's what they've been doing, and that's what they'll continue to do.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Erickson, that is what I expected you to say and what I hoped you would say.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to focus a little bit on that Tier 1, but also in other places. You have that they could teach with an associate degree. Now, that's a 2-year degree, and some associate degrees are terminal in the sense that the credits earned can't be used to advance toward a 4-year degree. So I guess my question is, they're maybe backing up a bit. There are basically 2 types of associate degrees. The one that you earn credits, you get an associate degree, but it's not a part of a ladder concept or anything where you can then use those credits and advance necessarily onto a 4-year degree. And then there are the associate degrees that are not terminal, where there are ladder concepts and so on where you can advance to a 4-year degree. So my question is why we're including associate degrees here, and I'll just, before the chair has an opportunity to answer that, when I attended college, I got my degree in 3 years. That meant I went 3 summer sessions. And I went to a university in southern Minnesota, Mankato, and at the time, when I was in summer session, there were all kinds of these teachers, many of them older, from Iowa. And Iowa was in the process in the early 60s of elevating their teaching corps. They had a large number that were there with two-year degrees that were now required under Iowa law to get a four-year degree. So northern Iowa was convenient to come up to universities in southern Minnesota. That was Mankato. I suspect, seeing my good friend Representative Pulowski, maybe back then, some of them went to Winona because of the convenience factor. But they were improving the teaching corps by requiring a four-year degree for licensure. So here now we build in an associate degree, a two-year degree. So there are two parts to the question, the one that's terminal and the other one that seems to, on the face of it at any rate, kind of take a step backward. Minnesota was very early in requiring a four-year degree. At one time in our history with the normal schools, you could go out and teach after 1 year. Representative Erickson, if you could touch on those basic questions, associate degree and why we're taking a step backward by requiring a two-year, or allowing a two-year.
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair, committee members, and Representative Carlson, in our discussions in the Legislative Study Group, it was noted from the career and technical persons who's testified that an associate's degree is often the degree that is earned by those in the career and technical area. So we did not want to deny them the opportunity to become teachers in the career and technical areas in our schools. Some come with professional credentials, and if you're concerned about the professional credential, the department has a long list of professional credentials that are available for school districts to check. But in regard to the terminal, I can't answer that question except to say that, again, I trust our school districts, our school boards, those who hire, which I know includes a panel of teachers usually, and superintendents and school districts, depending on the size, also an HR director. I trust that they're going to make prudent decisions for our children. And that's what I would hope that all of us would believe, that we trust in our school districts to make those good decisions.
Yeah,
Representative Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, the language that you've included, sufficient professional credential, I assume that was there to cover, because for many years I had the budget for the technical colleges and so on, and I'm familiar with their system, but they do have to go and make sure that they're licensed in the field and they can apply their lifetime experience. But what I found particularly troubling was associate degree without at least some form of a definition that would distinguish between an associate degree where you could continue to work toward a four-year degree. But I think the sufficient professional credential covers the tech colleges or tech programs that you might teach, and I'm not sure, it's been a while since I've looked at those issues where, like the three large intermediates in the Twin Cities, there are secondary voc programs. I've always assumed they had a four-year degree that would be employed, like out my way, by 287, and then there's 916, and I forget the number of the other one. But at any rate, I'm just expressing a concern I have because we have moved. In fact, the school districts, when the chair references school districts, they've really built incentives in, not only the teachers moving away from the technical part now, but have not only a four-year degree, but they've built in economic incentives for teachers to have a master's and to make sure we have a highly trained teaching force in Minnesota. So it seems like with Tier 1 and 2, we're taking a step backward in that regard, but thank you.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. About 20 minutes ago, my eyes started glazing over, and I was wondering why, and you are a good and wise chairman. But I was wondering, why are my eyes glazing over? And the reason was because we're talking educational policy and ways and means. And I'm a bit confused as to why we're talking about education policy and ways and means. If you look at the bill, it's already been to education policy, gov ops, public safety, ed, finance, and ways and means. If that's the bill we're on here. So are we ever going to talk about money, Mr. Chairman?
Well, Representative Davids, I'm not sure if you were here right away in the beginning, but we took the money out of the bill.
Okay, then, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I was, and so it begs the question, why aren't we just getting this bill to the floor? Since it has no money, the policy's already been debated.
Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, policy questions came from both sides of the aisle. I'll just remind the good chair of the tax committee, and I happen to be on taxes, as you are, Mr. Chairman, and taxes deviates a whole lot from tax policy,
It's my fault.
but I'll just stop there.
Well, we all know there are no rules in
It
taxes.
deviates sometimes in the tax committee.
Well, Mr. Chairman and Representative Carlson, there are no rules in taxes. First of all. Second of all, both sides of the aisle need to confine it to the money issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, speaking of money, I just wanted to remind the folks here that the Rosa girls won the state 2A basketball championship this weekend.
That's in the bill too, I guess. Any other discussion on House File 140 as amended? Representative Loon.
Well, I just quickly want to thank Representative Erickson publicly for all the work that she's put into creating this. I mean, she has really done a great job of bringing all the stakeholders together. I was part of the legislative working group that worked on this through the summer, but she's continued to take the recommendations from the legislative auditor, concerns of stakeholders, and mold this into something that I think will finally get us to a point where our licensure process makes sense for candidates who are seeking licensure and trying to understand what the requirements are. So I just want to say, good job, Representative Erickson, and to our staff, Christina Pera, and all those who worked on it. And it's long since time that we move this forward. Thank you.
Representative Liebling.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, this is about money. And Representative Erdahl had asked before about the issue of the Tier 1 teachers not, they're not on the regular steps and lanes and tenure and all that stuff.
Money question.
And the question was about, would the school districts hire them in preference to teachers who were 3 or 4? And my question is whether, I guess that the answer was there's nothing in the bill to stop that from happening, but that the school districts wouldn't do it. And my question is, if they can pay those teachers less, and they were under some, financial restrictions, as their districts often find themselves, why would they not then, if they were in a situation of having very restricted budget, why would they not hire a cheaper teacher if they felt like they had to do that for budgetary reasons? Is there anything in the bill that would prevent them from making that kind of a decision?
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair and Committee and Representative Liebling, again, I trust school districts. This Tier 1 replacement of the community expert has been going on since 1998, and I've never gotten any feedback from any organization that has questioned the use of the community expert. I've heard an isolated case here or there, but nothing conclusive about why a district would not consider a community expert after they have exhausted their posting for a licensed candidate. I don't think you realize how desperate some districts are for teachers because we have this great teacher shortage, especially in some areas like special education. And in the technical area now as we move into the technical arena. So I, again, put my faith in school districts, in my school boards, and in those who hire. And if it's a money issue, I think that is going to be raised when the decision is made by this panel who hires. And I used to serve on the panel, and we were very careful about the candidates we selected. So I trust my profession.
Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Erickson. I have no problem with community experts, as you say, after they've exhausted the posting, but, I'm just wondering here, we're conferring this new licensing status, and, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I'm just asking the question that, there is, let's just be very clear, there's nothing in the bill then, because you didn't tell me there is, that prevents a district, even though we have this there, I agree, there's a teacher shortage, and sometimes there are special areas and all of those things that fully justify the hiring of a community expert, or now would be, I guess, a Tier 1 teacher. But you've said that's only after they've exhausted the posting for a teacher who would be on the regular licensing track, I guess 3 or 4 now, for that. And in the bill, there is nothing that requires them to do that. So shortage or no shortage, it seems like under the bill, the district could choose this Tier 1 teacher in preference to another teacher, perhaps for financial reasons. I mean, is that true, that under the bill that is a possibility?
Representative Erickson.
Mr. Chair and committee and Representative Liebling, again, these decisions are made by a panel, the hiring decisions, and I'm going to continue to trust that panel who hires, and the posting has to be done, and from there, the decision is local, and that's where it should be.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor the point too long, but under both majorities, we've entertained discussion of policy. As we pointed out at an earlier meeting, sometimes they interact with one another. But I would only point out that this morning we adopted the 828 amendment, which was pure policy. So there are times when in Ways and Means things are done. Sometimes it's the author's request, sometimes it's a member of the committee. But that's been kind of the long-standing tradition, whether it was the Democrats in control or Republicans like yourselves. I just wouldn't want us to be too restrictive, but I'll just drop it at that point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Representative Carlson, I wasn't suggesting that we were going to change any policy on policy.
I wasn't making the comment for your benefit as much as others.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, the chair will renew his motion that House File 140 as amended be referred to the General Register. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion prevails. House File 140 as amended is referred to the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you, Representative Erickson. Okay, next up, we have Representative Howe with House File 326. Representative Howe, welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. The chair will move that House File 326 be referred to the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what this bill does is rename part of Highway 23 in the city of Paynesville and the town of Paynesville as the Kenneth L. Olson Memorial Highway. I don't know how far in depth you want me to go, Mr. Chair, but
Tell us a little bit about Kenneth Olson.
Kenneth L. Olson he received the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest honor, for military folks well, he was in Vietnam. He was a team leader. Him and another, one of his team members tried to maneuver onto a machine gun that had a bunch of folks pinned down. He rose up and threw a grenade to try and silence that automatic weapon. It did not silence it, so he rose again to throw another grenade and was wounded in the process. And in that process, he dropped their grenade within their position. Knowing that it would kill them both, he took the grenade and pulled it into himself and took the full blast, killing him, but saving the other member of his team. So in that regard, he was, for his profound courage, and he was rewarded posthumously the Medal of Honor. He is the only graduate of Paynesville High School to receive such an honor, and the only graduate of the University of Minnesota to receive that honor for the Vietnam War. So that is the crux of the bill.
Well, I
Mr. Chair.
certainly appreciate hearing about that and about his bravery and sacrifice, Representative Howe. Members on the finance, unless someone has some other questions about Kenneth Olson and his service, I should mention the whole fiscal note, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Marks to say a few words on that.
Mr. Chair, members, there is a fiscal note on this bill, which didn't get in the packet, but the fiscal note shows a cost of $2,000 to the Trunk Highway Fund, but then it also goes on to explain that the money won't be spent unless the $2,000 is raised from private sources or non-state sources. So it's showing $2,000 of cost and $2,000 of revenue coming in, and then it explains the conditions that these signs get erected if there are donations to cover the cost.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the City of Paynesville and the VFW there have acknowledged that those costs will be covered by them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, members, I'm certainly happy to renew my motion that House File 326 be referred to the General Register so that we can honor the memory of Ken Olson and his sacrifice for our country. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion prevails. House File 326 is referred to the General Register. Thank you, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee.
Okay, next we have House File 1659, Representative Anselmo. Representative Anselmo, welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. The chair will move that House File 1659 be referred to the General Register. And Representative Anselmo, I know there is an amendment here. Do you want to explain the bill first and then act on the amendment, or do you want to act on the amendment first?
Chair Knobloch, I'll explain the bill and then we can comment on the amendment.
Okay, please go ahead then.
Thank you, Chair Knobloch and committee members here. This is my first time in front of this committee, so I'm passing out treats here. Hopefully the first and last time that I have to do that again.
Oh, boy.
6 times here, so. We're seeking to get a general appropriation for the Transportation I-494 Corridor Commission. We were seeking $150,000 annually, and this will help with a program called Commuter Services, which is a TMO that is made up of the metro areas of Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Edina, Minnetonka, and Richfield. This program basically supports working with 1,000 employers on the 494 corridor, delivering services to help with commuters, and that's providing assistance to carpools, van pools, bike commuting, assistance in planning on all of these items. Basically, we had funding for this by member cities. We've also received funding from the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Commission, and those funds have been reduced vis-a-vis the Met Council. So we're seeking funds to do that for the fiscal years going forward. There's an amendment that would change that.
Well, members, the treats probably haven't reached you yet, but they look very good in the chair. They're on their way. Okay, Representative Anselmo, then we have the A1 amendment. The chair will move the A1 amendment, which I think the main thrust of the A1 amendment is instead of having it be a permanent standing appropriation, it basically makes it into an appropriation for just 2018 and 19. Is that correct, Representative Anselmo?
That is correct.
Okay, members, discussion of the A1 amendment. See no discussion. All in favor of the A1 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The A1 amendment is adopted. Okay, members, any discussion to the bill as amended? Representative Loom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank Representative Anselmo for carrying this. I'm a co-author. I know the very good work that is done by the this TMO in trying to, again, encourage people to carpool, to reduce congestion on our highways. This is an important component of our overall transportation efforts, so I think it's a good bill.
Representative Hornstein.
I'll echo those sentiments as well. I've carried this bill in the past, and we really need this on 494, so thanks for carrying this.
Thank you.
Okay, any last words, Representative Anselmo?
No. I'll go ahead and thank my co-authors for helping with this. It's great to have the bipartisan effort. I think I read a story today in the Star Tribune that we might need a little more funding in the metro area. So I think they're talking maybe tens of millions of dollars. This is just a couple $100,000. So hoping to have approval and your support. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Representative Anselmo, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of House File 1659 as amended, being referred to the General Register, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. House File 1659 as amended is referred to the General Register. Members, we next on the agenda, I believe, have House File 1545, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move House File 1545.
Representative Hamilton moves House File 1545 be referred to the General Register. Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill extends the Food Safety and Defense Task Force. There is a expenditure of $10,000 to the general fund. However, historically, we've received a $9,000 a year grant from the FDA, and we anticipate to continue receiving that. In the event we don't, MDA, Department of Agriculture, said they will absorb this cost. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Any questions for Representative Hamilton on his bill? Representative Hamilton, I see underneath the word animals that there are now not just large domesticated animals, but any animals.
Mr. Chairman, that's a policy question. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, that is correct.
That's funny.
That is correct. The Department of Agriculture asked for that clarification as well, so that it's all animals and not just fall underneath the definition of large if they are used for human consumption.
So would this be like rabbits, for example?
That is correct.
All right. No one's talked to you about adding legislators underneath this definition, have they?
That would be another animal, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of House File 1545 being referred to the General Register, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. House File 1545 is referred to the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee.
And, I should have called for Representative Garofalo. I'm afraid, I think he's chairing his committee. Maybe Representative, or Mr. Stone's probably out getting him right now. I guess while we're doing that, I know that we had at least one individual who wanted to testify on budget targets. Mr. Kronquist, would you be willing to come forward now?
You want to have this one?
Mr. Kronquist, welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. Can you state your name for the record and give us your testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Scott Kronquist with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, and appreciate the opportunity just to offer a few comments on the proposed budget targets. Probably not a surprise to you that we were hoping for a larger target in the E12 area. And I'll just give you a few figures to maybe relate why we were hoping for a larger target. We were really hoping the target would at least accommodate the legislation that Representative Loon and 34 co-authors are carrying, which would increase the formula by 2% per year. The cost on that would be $371 million, and so obviously the proposed target would not be sufficient for that. Just parenthetically, if we wanted to increase the formula by inflation, which I think is projected at about 2.5% over the biennium, that would be a $455 million price tag. We were also hoping, Mr. Chairman and members, that we could at least start to chip away at the special education cross-subsidy. And I know, Mr. Chair, you have worked very hard on that issue, and thank you for introducing your legislation to do that. Unfortunately, I think under the proposed target, it'll be very difficult to try to really start to address that special ed cross-subsidy. There are a few other areas that will be difficult to address. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the special ed cross-subsidy. That's become a term that is widely known. But we also have actually cross-subsidies in a few other areas. In our English Learner Program, right now, expenditures for school districts are exceeding state revenue by about $95 million. And then we're not even starting to talk about things like pre-K, which there's a lot of interest in, a lot of evidence that the good that does in closing the achievement gap. Again, it's going to be very difficult to invest in those areas under the proposed target. So we realize, Mr. Chair, that there's a couple months to go in the session, and we're hoping as we move forward that we will be able to see that E12 target move up significantly. So thank you for the opportunity to offer some comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cronquist. We are, I guess, Representative Garofalo is in the process of chairing his committee, but turning it over to his vice chair so that he can present his bill. Is there anyone else here today that wanted to testify on the budget resolution? Yes. Welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Beth Cadoon. I represent the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, an organization of 2,300 businesses across the state of Minnesota. About 80% of our membership is those with 100 employees or less. And we represent basically all industries, from those small mom and pop stores all the way up to the Fortune 500 companies. I just wanted to voice our support for the tax relief and the focus of tax relief and the budget targets. We think that's very important and a good way to start to best position Minnesota for really a strong economic future. We continue to hear from our members as well as the broader business community that high taxes and the high cost burden of doing business in the state of Minnesota is really an impediment to their ability to grow and invest in their Minnesota operations. So we believe this target will provide some great opportunities to reduce those uncompetitive taxes and, as I mentioned, really position Minnesota for a strong economic future. The other reason I'd like to say is we also saw in the last 2 years of 2015 and 2016, unfortunately, we did not have a tax bill that was signed by the governor. And because of that, those surpluses that were generated in 2015 and 2016, as you know, really went to increased spending, increasing the reserve, and we had very little, I think it was about 1%, that actually went to tax relief. So that's another reason that we really do think the focus this year should be on tax relief with the surplus that we do have, as well as some important infrastructure spending, because the other thing that we were not able to get past in the last 2 years was transportation infrastructure, and so we were happy to see that that's also included in this budget target. With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if you might comment just a bit about what caution we ought to be bringing to the process. We received in our packets today the revenue forecast uncertainty report. And the last paragraph says Minnesota's February 2017 economic and revenue forecasts carry a large degree of uncertainty related to U.S. economic policy, and they go on. In this case, the Senate has proposed $900 million in tax relief, and the House is proposing $1.35 billion. Do you have any, from a business perspective, what do you think a good business would do in the face of this kind of uncertainty in terms of cutting taxes?
Ms. Cadoon.
Mr. Chair. So just some things on the uncertainty. I think when you look at our MMB forecast that was just done, the economists and the state economists looked at the federal, the likelihood of the federal tax reform and changes. And in their forecast, the economists said, and so one reason that we do have an uptick in our surplus is they were looking at the federal tax changes with reduction in corporate taxes that are being proposed, individual income tax reductions, and the tax reform, showing that that's likely to help improve the economic growth. And that's one reason that was cited for our actually increased surplus. Under our MMB forecast as well, there is an uncertainty, which is true for every single forecast that we have. I think they gave this forecast that we currently have about a 60% likelihood of occurring. That's frankly not really out of line with past forecasts. I actually did look back multiple years to see, well, what's our percent? Is this more risky or less risky? Typically, it's between like 60 and 65% likelihood of any forecast that we have. So a little bit on the low side at a 60%, but certainly not out of line with past forecasts.
And so,
Representative Hausman.
and so, Mr. Chair, I heard you respond to the revenue forecast uncertainty, but not to caution about size of tax cuts. There's a significant difference in what the Senate is proposing, $900 million, as opposed to the House, $1.35 billion.
Ms. Kadoun.
So I guess I'm not completely tracking regarding the uncertainty with what we're currently doing at the state level. Is that the question?
Correct.
So, I mean, I think we're happy to see that we have tax relief being a predominant part of both the House and Senate. We'd like to see, obviously, the details as these play out. We hope they're focused on really our taxes where we're the most uncompetitive. So we're happy to see there's some business property tax relief that we think is certainly very important. We're hoping as we go into negotiations with the governor that the House and Senate do strongly advocate it for tax relief. And we'll see this will certainly play out in the next few months.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you and I both sit in on the Council of Economic Advisors as observers, as well as some of our staff. But a couple of things that they stressed in the report, and if you were there to listen to the discussion, was that we are experiencing the longest period of prosperity probably in modern times, and then what the probability of that might mean in terms of a downturn, especially the second year of the biennium. And when we had a presentation before this committee, remember they increased the uncertainty by an additional 5%. So we were moving in the direction of more uncertainty rather than less. I just point that out relative to the testimony and the questions about uncertainty. I think all of us should have a lot of concern about just how long this period of prosperity is going to take place. And the other thing is that when you listen to their discussion, probably, and I've sat in on those for many years, more discussion among the economists, and some are liberal, some are conservative. But I think that my take on it would be a whole lot of consensus about the uncertainty. And remember, they built that into the language of the report then. So just would emphasize that. And I think we have to keep that uncertainty in mind when we're looking at these various tax cuts. And this one that you released this morning is $500 million more in tax cuts than your counterparts, same political party, in the Senate. So I don't know what their argument for 900 is or your argument for the 1.4, but there's quite a wide range there of several hundred million.
Representative Liebling.
Well, Mr. Chair and members and Ms. Kadoun, I think there's an additional really big uncertainty in our forecast, and I don't know to the degree to which it's actually in this uncertainty report or considered when they talk about uncertainty in the forecast. But everybody knows that Republicans in Congress are trying to figure out ways to repeal the Affordable Care Act and, in addition, cut Medicaid. And we have in this state a pretty big healthcare industry. And the expenditures from the Affordable Care Act in Minnesota have done really good things for our healthcare industry here. And conversely, with the $2 billion a year expected cut from repeal of the Affordable Care Act and an unknown amount of cut from Medicaid that will be coming down from the federal government, it seems to me that this would be a time pretty unique in the years that I've been here, where there is substantial uncertainty about what this will do to our economy in Minnesota. And I would just say that at this particular time, to be doing tax cuts of this magnitude When honestly, it just always boggles my mind when I hear this rhetoric about high taxes are impeding our growth and all of that. We've been doing extraordinarily well among the states. And this is something we hear all the time. And I think that we have kind of a unique formula here in Minnesota, not to say that we could never tweak something here or there, or that, there aren't ways that taxes need to be adjusted. But to just take an enormous whack out of our budget as tax cuts at this time when we are facing this unknown future of cuts coming from the federal government that directly impact our economy, I just think this is a very, very irresponsible. So, Ms. Kadoun, we hear the same rhetoric, all the time. When we're in a deficit, we should cut taxes because that'll increase, that'll get us going, because trickle-down economics, we always go back to that. When businesses have tax cuts, we imagine that this all gets invested into the economy, and I think that it's pretty well proven that in fact doesn't work, and yet here we are again. When we've got extra, we should do tax cuts. When we've got a deficit, we should do tax cuts. I agree with her. And now it seems like we should do tax cuts because we didn't have them last year or last biennium, which reminds me of kind of that thing where your kids say to you, Mom, I've got to have this toy. I've been asking for it for so long. Well, I don't think that asking for it for so long is a very good reason, absent other reasons. And not saying we should do no tax cuts, but boy, oh boy, I think that what has been proposed here is absolutely irresponsible given where we are right now as a state.
Okay, Ms. Kadoun, if you want to make a response, please do so. And then I'd like to go to Representative Garofalo since he's back from the committee he was chairing. Ms. Kadoun.
Mr. Chair, members, just regarding, I guess, if it's a toy or not, I don't think tax reliefs and providing additional dollars to the private sector is really considered toys. I think we look at this as a matter of how can we reduce that fixed cost of doing business in the state. I completely agree with Representative Carlson. When you're looking at the economy and uncertainty, things like that, if we can make sure that we reduce that high fixed cost of doing business in the state, we think that will allow them to weather the ups and downs of any economic changes much better. And so we strongly recommend that and support additional tax relief that you are providing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kadoun. All right, I'm going to take Representative Garofalo now, and then, presuming we have time after Representative Garofalo, if there are others that want to provide testimony, we'll take further testimony then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that House File 1620 be recommended to pass and referred to the General Register.
Okay, Representative Garofalo moves that House File 1620 be referred to the General Register. And members, we have the fiscal note, the revised fiscal note being passed out now. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And members, what this bill does is it actually provides general fund savings for from the Minnesota Investment Fund. Right now, when these loans, these are business development loans that are given to local units of government, when they're repaid back currently, there's a certain amount of uses that they're allowed for, they're restricted to be used for. And what happened was earlier this session, I met with some representatives from a couple of communities who were looking for exceptions to the rules. And actually their exceptions were very reasonable, but then it got me to thinking of how many other communities can more effectively use these resources. So what this bill does, quite simply, is for a limited 12-month window, it allows local units of government to take these funds they already possess and use them how they wish under current state law rather than the program. In exchange for this, they are refunding back to the state of Minnesota 20% of the amount of their loan balance. It is voluntary, it's a temporary blink-on window, and it gives local units of government more flexibility for economic development. And I would ask for member support.
Questions for Representative Garofalo? Representative Murphy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and Representative Garofalo. Could you just maybe share with us a little bit examples of what that would mean? Like examples of what local units of government would use these funds for under current law that they're not currently able to use them for?
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Murphy. So, for example, and yeah, I think it's okay if I say this. I don't think so. There was a city that was looking to do economic development in the area of retail, and the reason why they were seeking MIF funds was that they wanted to use their MIF funds is because there was extensive infrastructure that needed to be moved to develop this retail project. And it's a prime location, it's good for the city, it's good for the region. The problem is under MIF law, the MIF rules, we don't allow incentives for retail development because we don't, the design of the program was not intended to have cities subsidizing competitors for existing businesses. However, clearly in this case, that was not what the intent of the law was. And so rather than writing exceptions like that, we're just allowing a temporary window where they would, this community's opportunity, they would be able to pay to move that infrastructure to allow for the retail site, the prime retail site to be developed.
And Mr. Chair, and Representative Garofalo, thank you for that. That's one example, and I appreciate that. In your work on this going forward, would you consider asking those MIFs that use this exception to share with you or with the legislature in return the examples or where they choose to invest that money so we can learn from that as well?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Murphy, that's actually a really good idea if we just said, hey, if you choose to use this option, let us know how you spend the money. I think, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm glad I thought of it.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Garofalo, so are there any rules currently in the plan that are being paused that impact employee wages, right? Were there requirements that they had to be livable wage jobs or that they have project labor agreements or that they had anything related to the kind of jobs that would be created in the end or the kinds of subsidies that, standards that they had to meet before they got the subsidy?
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Representative Hillstrom, first, just to be clear, this is the repayment of the loans for those projects. So we're talking about two separate silos. One is the initial project and whatever those rules are, and then there's another set of rules that would be for how the cities choose to use those monies. There are no project labor agreement requirements for this second pool of money. I know sometimes in the first silo that you mentioned, those things take place, but in the second pool of money, there is no requirement. With regards to like living wage requirements or whatnot, I'd have to look and see. But it's important to note that we're not giving cities carte blanche to like take this money and go buy lottery tickets, right? Like that's illegal under state law. It would still be illegal under state law. We're just allowing them to spend this money in a way that they're currently allowed to spend their property tax revenue on a temporary basis. But with regards to your second question, I don't think so, but I would ask nonpartisan staff to research if we can find them.
Representative Garofalo, can I ask, I know in the fiscal note, they're assuming that only a relatively small number of local units of government, like 25% of them, do this. Do you agree with that? Do you have any idea why that would be? It would seem to me that you'd have more interest in it if they could keep the money and use it for whatever they want rather than having to repay the loan.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the original fiscal note was at a much higher level, and then a revised fiscal note came out as lower. I think the original fiscal note was probably overly ambitious. I think this one is probably overly pessimistic. So where the number is going to come out is probably somewhere in between. But it's something we haven't done before. So in defense of the EBO, they're trying to model cities' behavior, and we all know how impossible that is.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Garofalo, what's the reason that we keep 20% of the money to incentivize them to spend the money in a different way?
Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hillstrom, first of all, I would say that we're not incentivizing them to spend the money in another way. We would say that we're, in some communities, a more appropriate use of those dollars may be beneficial to the community than the rules that were originally set up, and I cited the retail example. But the reason why is because when a deal was made with these communities, and number one, we want to preface the fact that this flexibility, it is different than the original terms of the contract they had with the state. And so there should be some level of financial accountability for that and a recognition that in exchange for this flexibility, you're going to pay a price for it.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But there's no additional auditing that the state's going to do. There's no additional paperwork that the state's going to do. This is really just charging them a fee to spend the money in a different way.
Representative Garofalo.
Or tax, maybe.
Oh, I wouldn't, Mr. Chairman, Representative Hillstrom, I wouldn't view it as a tax or a fee. I think that instead of giving the communities, I think it was $40 million, there's an option that they're going to get $38.5 million. So it's flexibility. And again, if the local units of government do view it in the words you use as a tax or as a fee, they don't have to do it.
Other discussion? See no further discussion, Representative Garofalo renews his motion that House File 1620 be referred to the General Register. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. House File 1620 is referred to the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay. Is there, going back to testimony, is there anyone else here today that wants to testify? Otherwise, we will take further testimony on Wednesday evening. Yes, sir. Please come forward, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson, welcome to the Committee on Ways and Means. Please state your name for the record and give us your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Peter Nelson, and I represent Center of the American Experiment. And I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about these budget targets. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, these targets reduce taxes substantially and in a very important way for Minnesota. We've heard a lot about how Minnesota's economy is apparently a model for the rest of the country. Well, Center of the American Experiment last year did some significant research on our economy. And what we found is that our economy really isn't above average. Our economy is muddling along at a mediocre pace. We're pretty much average or a little bit below average on all sorts of different metrics when it comes to personal income growth, job growth, and GDP growth. When you look at all these different metrics over the past 15 years, looking at that long-term approach, we are average. And we simply aren't a model for the rest of the country. And one thing that really jumped out at me in this research was when we looked at the metropolitan statistical areas around the region. When you look at those metropolitan statistical areas, these are the largest cities. You become a metropolitan statistical area once your population reaches a certain size. And there's, I believe, about 30 of these areas within Minnesota and our neighboring bordering states. Well, when you look at the top 10 metropolitan statistical areas for GDP growth in this region, there is not one Minnesota MSA that breaks into the top 10. There's 4 MSAs in Iowa that are in the top 10. And of course, in North Dakota and South Dakota have MSAs that are in the top 10 as well. And that really jumped out at me. Why is it that Mankato which is doing actually quite well relative to the rest of the state, why isn't that Mankato isn't keeping pace with Cedar Rapids, Iowa? And when you look at the differences between Iowa and Minnesota, taxes are clearly one difference. And it's important for us to continue to keep looking at our tax policy to make sure that our tax policy is competitive with the region and with the world. And these targets help us move in a way that's far more competitive than we are today. And the fact of the matter is, when we're trying to think of things to do to make our economy stronger, what can we do here at the state capitol? What can we do here? Tax policy is one of the few levers out there that we can pull to have any immediate impact. We have to do very important things on education, of course, and our work and things regarding our workforce to make sure we're training workers for the jobs of tomorrow. And that's important. We have to absolutely prioritize that as well. That's a longer-term investment that we need to continue to improve. Right now, taxes are something that we can look at right now and in the short term, pull that lever and have provide some immediate benefits to businesses and to give businesses that might be considering expanding here or moving here a vision for Minnesota that we're not going to be a high tax state anymore, that we're going to be a state that provides competitive tax rates, that lets businesses thrive. And so that's what I really wanted to focus on here, because I do think that taxes needs to continue to be a priority, because we have had a history over the past few years of raising taxes in some ways quite substantially. And we need to start stepping back from that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if your organization, when you were doing that research, looked at Kansas. Kansas is sort of unique in the country. Governor Brownback was going to make Kansas the laboratory for tax cuts to show that if you just cut taxes, your economy would grow. And unfortunately, he still had to balance the budget, and so he had to cut in the two areas, education and transportation, which of course are two areas that we know are essential to a competitive economy. And schools began to worry, teachers began to worry. They had, there were fears of closing schools and laying off teachers. And this year, something unusual happened. They were also unique to Kansas. Their elections went very differently from the rest of the country. The Brownback Republicans were defeated by moderate Republicans, and more Democrats were elected in Kansas than anywhere else in terms of actual growth. And now they're the legislature is moving to raise taxes. So I always hope that we as a state or we as a nation might look at exactly where the laboratories are for proving that, that theory that we just keep hanging on to.
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Hausman, yes, I have looked at Kansas, and Kansas is absolutely the model for how not to cut taxes. The Tax Foundation went out and testified on their bill when they were passing their bill, and they testified against it because it wasn't a rational, reasonable way to cut taxes, because it did lead, you could absolutely predict it was going to lead to these gaping deficits. In fact, I've got family who owns a farm in Kansas, and they tell me the Kansas approach was built off of an assumption that oil revenues were going to start coming in. And those oil revenues never came in. They didn't wait until the revenues were there before they passed their bill. It was a very irresponsible approach to cutting taxes. There are, though, models around the country on how to do this that have been quite successful. Look to North Carolina. Look to Indiana. Those are approaches that provided a balanced approach that did the sort of things that sound tax policies suggest you should do, which is to broaden the base that you apply these taxes to and to lower the rates. And that's exactly, that basic approach is exactly what we see happening in North Carolina and in Indiana.
And so, Mr. Chair, if I could just have you comment the same question I asked the Chamber representative, given the revenue forecast uncertainty report, and they specifically say that Minnesota's forecast carries a large degree of uncertainty related to U.S. economic policy. Given the fact you've observed Kansas did it wrong, the Senate is proposing, the Senate Republicans are proposing a $900 million tax cut, and the House is proposing a $1.35 billion, which is quite a significant difference. Might you have some observation about that?
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Hausman, my observation is, why didn't the Senate go a little bit further? Yes, there's uncertainty. There's always uncertainty when we're setting budgets. But we work with that uncertainty, and right now, when you look at their budgets, they're balanced. The budgets that we're looking at are balanced, and despite the uncertainty, we have built up a budget reserve. That is one of the strongest budget reserves that we've had in years. And that budget reserve helps us deal with that uncertainty. And maybe that budget reserve should be a little bit bigger, too. It's not necessarily filled to the point that I think M&B would like it to be filled. So to address uncertainty, we might want to consider filling that up a little quicker. But today, what we do know is that the budget is balanced through this approach. Despite that uncertainty, we can always make modifications to the budgets when we learn more. And we will start learning a lot more. We talked about what's going to happen at the federal level with healthcare. That is a big uncertainty. We're hearing them talk about going to Medicaid block grants, and that's going to have a different impact on Minnesota than the per capita approach. And so we do have to be aware of all of these things, of course. And hopefully, in the next month, we'll know a lot more about what's going on at the federal level to give us a lot more certainty about where we should be hitting.
I have Representative Carlson and Murphy. Representative Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, I would be interested in your reaction to some of the other numbers in the budget resolution. Your testimony focused on taxes, but there are significant cuts in their proposal that was released this morning. And even in some of the areas where there are increases, they're relatively modest. And in your testimony, you seem to indicate, if I understood you correctly, that investing in education would be important. We've got some huge problems in higher education with student debt and so on. So I'd be interested in your comments about other parts of the budget. And then before I leave, just a comment that he need not respond to, but when he references Iowa, and I've got good friends in Iowa, and I don't want to beat up on Iowa, and I'm not one that tells Iowa jokes. However, the state of Iowa, not too many years ago, was very concerned about their drop in population and were putting tax incentives in directly to their citizens if you'll stay and live in Iowa. So there's some problems with Iowa, you know, when you begin to compare their population centers with some of ours. You know, things aren't perfect in Iowa. And I'll just drop that. Now, you don't need to respond to that because you already referenced Iowa. But I am interested in your response to other parts of the budget, especially when you referenced education and what your response to that funding level is.
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Carlson, it's hard to respond to some of these other parts of the budget because we don't know the details right now behind what's going to be cut and what's going to be increased. We need to see more of those details fleshed out before I can make a real informed decision. But the one thing that jumps out as far as the spending increase is that it's prioritizing transportation. We agree that transportation absolutely needs more money in this state. That needs to be a priority, and I'm pleased to see that that's a priority in these budget targets. And to the extent we see some reductions in state government, I'm not exactly sure where those reductions are going to be taking place. So I can't really comment on that. When it comes to education, there's all sorts of research out there showing that just throwing money at education doesn't improve outcomes. We need some reforms to our education system that are outside of just increasing levels of funding. And I am hopeful right now that I've seen a lot of bills coming forward around the workforce and just trying to connect students to the skills they need for today's workforce. And I don't think that costs a lot of money. It's just changing some of the ways we do things in our education system. It's changing attitudes in the culture. It's changing attitudes about whether someone needs a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. And in fact, it might actually result in spending spending less money when it comes to higher education, because a lot of students are going to get a higher value out of a 2-year degree, and they'll have a much more satisfying career out of that 2-year degree than spending 4 years in a 4-year school where they're learning something that really doesn't give them the skills they need to succeed. So I guess on all those fronts, that would be my response.
Representative Carlson?
Some of what you just said is counter to what some are saying about the need for 4-year degrees and so on, but I'm not interested in debating all the pros and cons of various education initiatives. I was just interested in the number. But Mr. Nelson, you did indicate on some of the other areas of the budget that you didn't have any idea about the details, but yet you were willing to buy into $1.4 billion in tax cuts without the details in your testimony. And I would only point out that, you know, we had significant tax cuts in 1998, 99, I forget the exact year there, but it put us on a roller coaster for the next 10 years. So I was pleased to at least you mentioned the budget reserve. However, that roller coaster, some of those problems that we encountered were far beyond what we would have in the budget reserve, even if we had it completely filled under our current law goal. So I would exercise some caution from my perspective about doing things that would put the state back on that roller coaster. But the other thing is that the number for tax cuts, we were over $1 billion in tax cuts 2 years ago when it left the House. It didn't come back that way, obviously. But there was a lot of debate at the time, Mr. Nelson, about who was benefiting from those tax cuts, especially on the business side. We found out that investors out of, I think it was Dallas, Atlanta, were going to get huge windfalls on the tax reductions on some of those downtown commercial buildings, some of the large skyscrapers, I'll call them. And the argument was, well, maybe they'll invest back in Minnesota. And the counter argument was there was no assurance of that. If you're sitting in Atlanta, you might choose to invest in Montreal or New York or Chicago, not necessarily Minnesota. So there was no real guarantee that those dollars, which were very significant in that tax bill, would come back to Minnesota. So I think it's important that as this moves ahead, I would hope you, Mr. Nelson, would look at the details of the tax bill as well, if the majority chooses to pass the tax bill at the level that's in the budget resolution, because the devil is in the details, as you pointed out in reference to the other parts of the budget, but didn't do so with taxes. You went to an old report, but we've got real numbers before us now. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, any more comments?
Mr. Chair, Representative Carlson, in regards to taxes, we do have a model that was passed last year that just was never signed by the governor. So we know a lot more about the tax policy than we do about these other policy areas. And you referenced the statewide general tax, and that is something that was a priority last year. And I think that's going to be a priority this year. I hope it is, especially when you're looking at greater Minnesota. That presents a disproportionate burden in greater Minnesota on the businesses that are out there. And so I think that provides important tax relief in that area, especially since we're seeing the MSAs out in greater Minnesota, some struggling, especially St. Cloud. And that's some important direct tax relief that I hope to see in this next bill. And so I think there is a general sense that we have a much better idea what tax cuts look like versus what state government will, how that'll change, how Health and Human Services will change.
Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, when you reference, Mr. Nelson, the tax bill that was passed was a very different bill than the one that passed the Minnesota House. My comments were about the one that passed the Minnesota House that was $1 billion plus in tax cuts. That changed dramatically in conference committee, and the bill that came back that was passed that had the error in, and we don't need to debate why it was vetoed, but there was a huge error, and that was one of the reasons the governor vetoed it. But the whole issue of how big that tax cut was and where the money went and how much of it went out of state was the point I was trying to make. And it might be one question if the dollars were being retained in the state of Minnesota, but when you're giving tax cuts that are going out of state with no assurance that they reinvest in Minnesota was the point that I was trying to make. But thank you.
Well, Representative Carlson, I think we'll have this debate again on Wednesday night, but I'm not sure that I would agree with your characterization that just because someone from out of state owns a building in downtown Minneapolis, that the tax cuts are going to that person out of state. In my experience in real estate, almost all of those tax cuts tend to go to the people who are the tenants of the building, as the tax cuts are passed through underneath the net leases that are normally signed for buildings like that. But we can get into a debate about that on Wednesday night.
Mr. Chairman, there was no assurance of that, was my point, that would actually have happened. They were given the tax cuts. They were landlords or owners from out of state in many instances with very significant investments. We didn't know that that would pass down to the tenants. There was nothing that would assure that. And that's my whole point. There would be one question if there would have been an assurance. I would still have concern about the size of some of those cuts relative to what happened in 1998, but we'll continue on Wednesday night, I guess, is what...
We can talk about more on Wednesday night. Representative Murphy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Nelson, you made reference to a report or data that you were looking at, making comparisons of communities, and you mentioned Cedar Rapids and Mankato. I'm interested in learning more about that. You also said that one of the factors you believe that might be impacting the differences between those communities is taxes. Have you looked at other factors that differentiate between Cedar Rapids and Mankato besides taxes in order to help us understand how you drew that conclusion?
Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Murphy, yes. I mean, I'm always aware of various factors that are going on, and there's always different things when it comes to the workforce, when it comes to your migration patterns, and so there's a lot of other things that go into an economy. There's a lot of things that drive an economy. Taxes are just one of them, and so there are some differences in Cedar Rapids versus Mankato. Cedar Rapids, I believe, has a very strong financial sector. It's got a very strong insurance sector, and so that could be one of the reasons why Cedar Rapids is doing better than Mankato. Mankato doesn't really have that sort of sector that's been experiencing some substantial growth over the past 5 years, and so I would say that's probably one of the big areas. But then you have to ask, well, why does Cedar Rapids have such a strong financial sector like that? Why does Sioux Falls, South Dakota have such a strong sector in that regard? Why do these things pop up in those areas and not in these other Minnesota towns that are similarly sized? To me, it's their tax policy and their regulatory policy. That's the difference. And clearly in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, it's the tax policy and the regulatory policy that has attracted these businesses. I'm not sure if you saw the Wall Street Journal the other day, but they highlighted Sioux Falls. And the growth in Sioux Falls is phenomenal. And you really have to point to their tax and regulatory policy to prove that it matters. These policies do matter. They're not all that matters. There's no question about that. But when you see places like Sioux Falls, you can't deny that maybe Minnesota could do a little better to make our state a little friendlier for businesses. And when I do look to Iowa, when I've talked to people, it is that sort of friendliness, that partnership approach. Businesses feel like the state government in Iowa is a partner. Too often in Minnesota, businesses find that our regulatory agencies are no longer partners. They're really kind of opposed to how they do business. And instead of trying to figure out solutions, so they both move forward together, they're always they're just regulating too much, taking too long to issue permits, and all of those sorts of things. So all of these things, of course, mix together to drive an economy. And it seems pretty clear to me when we look at those other places, though the taxes do make a difference.
And Mr. Chair and Mr. Nelson, thank you for that. I appreciate knowing that it is your conclusion that you're drawing and making that distinction. I also, appreciate and agree with you that it is more than just tax policy that makes for an economy. But I would put our friendliness up against South Dakota's friendliness and Iowa's friendliness any day, and would bet that Minnesota is the friendliest state among them.
Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wasn't here on time because I was at the Vets on the Hill Day, and we have hundreds and hundreds of veterans that are here today, so they'll probably be coming by your offices. And if you would like to have a list of bills that were passed last session, I have them listed, and they're at my office at 565. Also a list of bills. There was 18 bills that were signed into law last year, and this year we heard 42 bills in my division committee. And they're off in different committees now, omnibus bills and whatever. But I have a list of those bills, too. If you'd like to get a list, just stop by my office. And regarding a bill that we passed last year, it's always hard to get rid of a tax, but we did get rid of that tax in the veterans' pensions. And I've been getting calls all this summer and everything of people that are getting ready to retire from the military, and Minnesota is in the running now. People want to come back to the Midwest. Now they don't have to settle for Iowa, Wisconsin, South Dakota, or North Dakota. they can settle here in Minnesota. And I've had people call me, say they're coming back to Minnesota. And most of these people, after 20 years, they're in their 40s. They're going to be starting second careers. They're going to start businesses. They're going to buy homes. They can use their benefits now, the GI Bill, now their spouse and their kids can use for college. So it's a great resource to bring these retired veterans, these men and women, back to Minnesota. So we're proud that we can be one of those states now.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just I hope that Representative Detmer has taken note of state government and veterans. The net in your budget resolution that will be before us Wednesday night is a cut of $430 million. So I've spoke in more than one committee about my interest in veterans, and I would just put on the table that's a major concern of mine with that kind of a cut number when those veterans accounts are in that particular area of the budget. So I would hope that maybe we have some discussion about that on Wednesday night and what that means for veterans.
No, on that point, I should mention, if you look at the target worksheet that's out that was prepared by Mr. Marks, you'll see a little A next to the state government line, and it's a little bit skewed because there's $328 million of spending in 2017 that's counted in that target. That is the Premium Healthcare Reduction Act that we passed earlier this session. That $328 million that we spent out of the budget reserve to reduce healthcare premiums for people in the individual market is part of that state government target. That's where it was put. And while there's still a reduction there, I guess I want people to understand that it looks to be vastly greater than one would normally expect because of the fact that even though we spent that money in this legislative session, it's counted as being in 2017, so it looks like a big reduction.
But Mr. Chairman, it's still $100 million even.
It's still about $90 million, yes, sir. Seeing no further discussion, Representative Nelson, do you have any other points you wish to make? Mr. Nelson, I said that, didn't I? Did I say Representative
Mr. Chair,
Nelson?
I just got elected.
Mr. Nelson, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I didn't know that was that easy. I see
I'm
you guys
used to
knocking
saying
on doors all
representative.
the
What can I
time.
say? Mr. Nelson.
No, I think that can conclude my comments here.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to provide testimony today? Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, Mr. Chair, given that the budget targets were just released today, and the folks at home didn't have an opportunity to see them ahead of time, when we do the budget resolution on Wednesday, will you be taking public testimony then as well?
Yes, Representative Hillstrom, we will be taking public testimony then as well. And I want to also mention, I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning of the meeting when I talked about this, but in the past, we've normally taken the testimony before we've come out with any budget targets. And so this is, in some ways, I think, perhaps more transparent to do it this way after we release the targets. But yes, we allocated an extra long meeting on Wednesday night so we can take additional testimony if people want to give it.
Thank you.
All right, with that, members, we are adjourned, and we'll see you on Wednesday evening.